Friday is the second game in the Friday project, which Friedemann Friese started in 2008, and this game was released in 2011. It's a solo game. It can only be played solitaire, and it comes in a small box like this. This is a deck building game in the vein of games like Dominion and that sort of thing. It comes with a bunch of these tokens, which here represent life tokens, and then several different decks of cards. And the theme of the game is that you are playing as Friday and you're trying to teach Robinson Crusoe skills so that he can get off of the island. The first thing that you do in the game is you draw 2 hazards from the hazard deck, and we look at them this way up. We are only looking at the top now, so we can either go exploring the island or further exploring the island. Further exploring the island is more difficult. We're currently on the green level. The difficulty level will crank up throughout the game, so that it'll become 5 and 8. So I'm going to start with exploring the island here. So I put this one to one side. I now play this on the table, and it allows me to draw 2 Robinson cards. So I draw 2 of them, and I get focused for 1 attack and weak for 0 attacks. And I need to achieve a total of 1, which I've achieved here, and so I've beaten that hazard, which means that that hazard gets added to my deck and it gets flipped around. So now next time it's got a value of 1, but I'll also gain 1 life point when I use it. So the cards and your deck gets better and better, as with any deck building game. And you can use life points always to draw more cards if you can't beat something, until of course you're dying. So these are used as a sort of currency. Once the deck's gone through, then you start to draw these aging cards, which are always bad cards, and they start to get mixed into your deck as well and making your deck worse. At the end of the game, once you've been through this deck 3 times, so once on each difficulty setting, you're going to face one of 2 pirates, which are chosen at the start of the game, and you have to beat them in order to win the game. And then there are various difficulty levels which are described in the rules, and different ways of keeping track of your overall score so that you can go back and try and beat your high scores. It is a clever little game, a clever variation on the deck building theme. It's nice to be able to play it solo. There's not a lot of variety in the game, so it does start to feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again and just trying to beat your previous scores or beat it on a higher difficulty level. So for me, it doesn't have masses of replayability, but it is nice to have such a small package, you know, such a portable solo game. This is a great one to stick in a suitcase if you're off, you know, travelling on business or something like that, stuck in a hotel room. This is quite a nice game to play, or on a train or something like that. Very portable, simple, but clever, and also quite challenging. It's not easy to beat either. So that's Friday. For the 10th anniversary of Funkenschlag, Friedemann Friese produced a game called Power Grid: The First Sparks, which is really a reworking of Power Grid. It has been called a lighter Power Grid. I think it's not really lighter in its mechanics. It's not easier than Power Grid. It's quicker. It's basically a quicker, simpler, almost smaller version of Power Grid set in the Stone Age. Now that's not an obvious match for Power Grid is the Stone Age, but what we're looking at here is people trying to spread their clans of cave people on these boards here, and this is a variable board. It varies depending on how you set it up. Again, we have a market with various different technologies and production abilities. So the basket's going to help you to gather berries. The field is producing grain. And then we have other things like fire here, which means that you can hide food. Food doesn't rot, so you don't have to use it each turn. There's phases in the game where you spend your food as a sort of currency, and that allows you to place more people on the board. Certain connections will cost more because you're crossing mountains or because you're trying to place them into an area where there's already a clan. And then we have a board over here, which is the equivalent of the market, where different numbers of bears and mammoths and fish and berries will build up on the board, and that will adjust how much you can take when you're hunting in the other phases. Again, the number of clans as they build up. So currently red's got 4, so he'll be up here. And white's got 2, and green's only got 1, and then that affects the playing order, so green's going to be going first. So it works very much like Power Grid. It's all very familiar. There's no auction in this. The cards over here are not directly auctioned off. It's more a case of I choose one and then I offer it up and see if the other players want to buy it. But when they do buy it, they buy it for the cost that it says. So that phase has gone from the game. and that's one of the things that quickens it up quite a lot. This is a very fun game. I've never quite worked out whether it's worth having this and Power Grid. If you enjoy Power Grid and you get it to the table a lot, then maybe there's no point in having this. Whereas if Power Grid is quite a hard sell for you, people don't buy into that sort of dry theme, or it's too much of a time investment, then maybe this is a game to consider. All in all, this is a fantastic game. If Power Grid wasn't around, I think this would be hailed as a really great game. But it does sit oddly next to Power Grid as its slightly smaller brother, but it's not light enough to really see it as a light version of that game. This is a fairly meaty Euro game, but it plays in quite a short time, and the theme is very appealing, and these pieces are lovely. There's a little bear and a mammoth and a fish. You know, and this all really adds to the game. I always love tactile pieces, and these are great ones. In 2012, Friedemann Friese was still working on his Friday project, and he set about creating a game which was merging together the most popular games of the time. And the two which he mainly took inspiration from were Dominion and Agricola, although there are elements of Through the Ages and Puerto Rico thrown in there. The game is a deck builder with worker placement elements as well, and it looks a bit like this. So the aspects that are familiar from Agricola are these cards up here and the worker placement, so you can place your workers on various spaces in order to take whatever they give you, but more spaces will become available throughout the game as these cards get turned over after each round, and so the game ends when we get to the end of that final round, or when we reach 95 points. So there is a race element to the game, as Friedemann Friese tends to prefer. Then there is this track down here of cards that are available, and these constantly change as we draw them from this deck here, and this is the element that's come from Through the Ages. And then from Dominion we have our own personal deck, and the deck, you'll notice, nice and familiar. We have 7 money cards and 3 victory point cards, so we would deal ourselves 5 of these each turn and then have a look. So I've got 3 gold to spend from these fatherly friend cards, and then I've got 2 victory points which I'm going to generate, which would advance me around the scoring track along here as I go around. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. There's one element that's unique for other deck building games, and that is that one of these cards we're not going to be able to use. We're going to bid with these cards for player order. In a lot of Friedemann Friese games, player order is really significant, and this is no different. So I might, for example, bid with this one, so I'm essentially throwing this away for this round, but it gives me the number 15, and if that beats the other players, I'll get to go first. And then as I buy other cards throughout the game, they're going to give me different bonuses. This one gives me a point or 2 victory points. Some of them will give me additional workers, like this one here. This one here and this one here. This one is a negative, almost like a curse in Dominion, and you have to take these if you buy anything to the right of them. Also, you'll notice that they cost more when they're further up this end of the track here. So it's a straight up deck builder, really. It feels very similar to something like Dominion, but without all that variety in there. That said, there's a lot of character and personality in this game, and the theme, while completely pasted on, is beautifully rendered, really, with these lovely artwork, lots of very cynical and satirical sort of cards, which will have familiar images on them, and you know, it's a nice game, a really good alternative to all the sort of deck building, superhero and battling and Lord of the Rings and all the other deck builders that come out. This one is a deck building done Friedemann Friese style, and it's very satisfying for that. I'll talk very briefly through a typical turn in this. So if I have these cards in front of me, because I've discarded that other one to get the best player order, I currently have 2 coins available and 2 victory point markers here, but on my turn what I have to do is place one of my 3 workers. So if I place this one here, that lets me draw an extra card from my deck. The alternatives would be to go here, 2 victory points, here, lets me play a card twice, this lets me trash a card and get some money, and so on. Some of them are for money, some of them let me buy cards from down here, and so that's how I'm going to get more cards into my deck. But whenever I play a worker, I can also play any number of cards from my hand at the same time, and so it goes round turn after turn, and then at the end of each round, once everyone's had a turn, we would turn over another one of these and more powerful action spaces become available. So that's how a round goes in a game of Copycat. You know you're becoming a Friedemann Friese fanboy when you purchase a copy of Greg's Tagebuch von Idioten Umzingelt in German with no English instructions. I've managed to make a translation of this now. It's Diary of a Wimpy Kid, so this is a child's game, and this seems to be surrounded by idiots. This is a simple push your luck game. There's not a lot to it. We essentially are looking at a list of who are the most popular kids in school, and they're ranked from 2 up to 51, and then our characters over here are trying to move up in popularity, and they're going to do that by taking various different activities which I've pasted up along here. So listening to heavy metal music is going to make them more popular, wrestling is going to make them more popular, losing their comics is not, and so on and so forth. You know, getting a nice Christmas jumper reduces their popularity. There we are, Christmas jumper -1, and so on. You know, fairly logical sort of stuff. And then there's this stinky cheese card which gets mixed in. If you draw that, then your turn ends and you go down in the popularity. So on your turn, what's likely to happen is you'll have initially 3 cards. These will get mixed in with the stinky cheese card, and then you draw cards to see if you can move up, and you keep going as long as you want. So, okay, I've drawn a stinky cheese card straight away, so my turn is over, and I go back to the beginning. These cards then stay for the next player, so the next player draws another 3 cards. 1, 2, 3, and then these ones all get mixed in with the stinky cheese, and they get muddled up, and then that player draws as many cards as they want, so they draw 1, looking for swear words, yeah, they'll go again, wrestling in gym class, okay, they'll stick with that. So this player, say Holly, has got 2, so they got 2 places in the rankings, so they're now up here, and the player wins the game when they get all the way to the end of the ranking and they get down to here. So it's a race game, but not like any other Friedemann Friese race game that I've played. This is a very simple children's game. It's not something that gamers are going to want to rush out and buy, but for the Friedemann Friese completist, it is cheap, and it's very easy and accessible, and you can get anyone to play it, you know, nice and easy. Yeah, so that is Greg's Tagebuch von Idioten Umzingelt, which was released in 2012. So here we are, having gone full circle after 21 years back with Landlord, a 2013 re-release of this game with some new rules and lovely new components. Now, you'll remember I said how much I liked the artwork in the original. Well, the artwork in this one is absolutely fantastic. Lovely, colourful artwork, nice long cards. Again, they're dual use, so we've got the building on the back. Now, in this version of the game, the roofs are separate from the rest of the deck, so we don't clog our hand up with roofs. Again, we have a jail card, and now we have a separate monster deck, which works with one of the particular tenants, which is the scientist tenant. The scientist will only live in the roof, so if we put in a roof expansion, we can put a scientist in there, and then on subsequent turns, he's going to create monsters that are going to fill up spaces and pay us rent. But it's not all new tenants. We've got all the old classics, families, we've got squatters that'll move in and cause other people to move out. We've got the old hackers who are the students from the original game. We can build basements, and you know, we can get up to all the old hijinks of bombing buildings. We can demolish buildings. We can murder tenants, but then they might call the police on us. It's all the same old stuff. Instead of the paper money, we've now got this nice, these chips, which are quite nice, 1, 3s, 10s and 50s. And the gameplay is a little streamlined. It's still got a massive snowball effect. If you get ahead, you just run away with it and steam through this deck. But in this version of the game, there's a lot more of that stack management in there as more and more cards, these action cards, the nasty ones, you know, the murders and the bombs and what have you, when they're used, they get discarded from the game, whereas the tenants, when they're murdered, they will tend to get buried under the deck, and so they come back into it. So towards the end of the game, there's more tenants, more constructive play. The gameplay is quick if a player really gets going with it, but it can drag if players take their time over their turns and keep taking money rather than cards, and ultimately it's money that wins you the game. So it really is variable in sort of playing time and depending on the players. It's not a balanced game. There's a lot of luck in it. It's very thematic, and you know, it does feel like an improvement to the original game. But whether you like the new artwork or the old artwork is one sort of factor to look at. Although that said, getting a hold of the old copy, I guess, is going to be difficult, where getting a hold of this is going to be quite easy at the moment. So this is a good game. I'm glad he's revisited it. As I say, it gives loads of hope for him revisiting a lot of his old games, as he has done over the last few years. So hopefully we'll be able to see some old classic titles over coming years. So that is an overview of Friedemann Friese, of all the games that I've experienced of his. There are many other games, as I said, which are out of print, or which are hard to come by, or only available in Germany, and so on. There's the new game which came out at Essen 2013, which I haven't played yet, the fourth game in the Friday project, called Futterneed, which is a game about sweets, placing sweets into different bowls and them all having different values. That looks quite fun, worth a look. And then, you know, these games there's a wealth of games to explore, those different elements that run through the games, that stack management, the racing, the randomness, the interaction. These are all strong points in Friese's games. And if you like those elements and you like the artwork and the slightly offbeat sense of humour and personality in the games, then you could do well to explore Friedemann Friese games and look beyond Power Grid. Power Grid is clearly his masterpiece and his flagship game, but there's plenty more to explore and a lot more to look out for and look forward to coming out from this game, from this man and his design studio, to F Spiel, in the future.